annual Town Manager Search Public Forum. And we'll start with an introduction by Doug Thomas from Strategic Government Resources. Doug, you are welcome to take it away. You've been made a co-host, so you can share your screen for the PowerPoint presentation.
Great, thank you. And I assume then, Michael, you'll just let people in as it looks like they're joining or trying to join the room.
Well, let's just let them in. You might hear a bang, but that's just letting them in.
Gotcha. Okay, super. Well, let me get the shared screen up here and you'll be able to see everything here. Okay. All right, whenever, Steve, are you ready for me to just go ahead and start?
Take it away. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome, folks, and appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening with you and the town council and staff to talk a little bit about one of the more important things that your town council is involved with, and that's the selection of your successor town manager. So what I've done is prepare a PowerPoint that'll introduce me and the firm and the process, and then open it up to some questions and answers to allow your feedback and receive some comments and perspectives about various questions that we like to engage with the community and stakeholders in the community as part of our search process. So without that as a background, let me just open things up and just we'll take it from here. So I'll tell you first and foremost, I want to talk a little bit about the firm, and then I'll talk about my background as it relates to the work that we're doing there in Tolland. But SGR, or what is referred to as Strategic Government Resources, has been around since 1999. As you can see from the slide, we're involved in a variety of local government services across the country. Many folks recognize us from our executive recruitment work. We're one of the larger public sector executive recruitment firms in the country. But beyond that, we really bring a culture of understanding of local government operations in terms of the services we provide and the people that are engaged with Strategic Government Resources as either contractors or, like myself, as employees of the firm. As you can see, we've got core values of integrity and philanthropy and continuous improvement, flexibility, the golden rule, collaboration, and protecting relationships we have with both not only our clients, in this case, obviously the town of Tolland, but also with the candidates and the stakeholders we work with throughout the process. I'd like to highlight the fact that SGR is unique in the sense that we are a full-service local government firm. So as you can tell, we are involved with executive recruitment. We're also involved with live training and online training. We train about 1,000 government employees a month, either online or on-site, in various components of activities. But we do a lot of leadership development programs, and both on-site and online, and working with teams to help them develop their skill sets and working better as a group. We provide interim management services. At any given time, we probably have close to 20 people that are involved in either interim capacities or embedded services. Several smaller communities like to have an HR director, for an example, 2 or 3 days a week as opposed to full-time. And so we're able to work with those communities as well. We do a lot of assessment work with communities and helping them evaluate operations and personnel as they're going through personnel and promotional opportunities. We're also heavily involved in strategic visioning and strategic planning. I facilitate a lot of workshops with communities, both staff and elected officials and nonprofit groups and other quasi-governmental operations in strategic planning and priority-based budgeting. We do a variety of other management consulting and other services that really try to strive to promote innovation in local governments. In addition to that program, both the CEO of the company, Ron Holofield, myself, are pretty active speakers at state and national conferences discussing best management practices and trends and issues that are taking place in the local government arena. And I say that in the sense, I think the fact that we're involved in all these other types of services and we kind of come from the local government world and it's in our DNA, that I think we're better executive recruitments because we're not just a firm that's involved with solely executive recruitment. We are embedded in so many other operations of local government that I think that makes us a better recruiting firm as we're working with communities such as yours and trying to help you go through a process of a recruitment and selection effort for your town manager. My personal background, as you can see from this slide, is about 35 years in municipal government management, senior government management. I've worked in positions in Maryland, Michigan, and Florida. And actually, probably one of the best commercials for SGR. I was engaged as the city manager with the city of Lakeland, Florida, which was my last active post. And I engaged SDR to assist me in the recruitment of 3 different department heads that were either retiring or accepting other positions in other communities. And the CEO of the company, Ron Holefield, and I kind of clicked, and we got to know each other. And I was impressed not only as a client of SDR, as the city manager, in terms of the way in which the firm operated with me as the client, but also the way in which the firm has engaged with the candidates that were in those various searches, and the quality of the candidates and how they went through the process. And so as that process unfolded, I had been city manager in Lakeland for about 12 years. And I was looking at various alternatives. Other communities and organizations were contacting me, and Ron actually asked if I might be interested in getting into local government consulting. And I thought I would do that when I officially retired. And he says, no, I was talking about coming on board on a full-time basis. So after about 3 months of a yes, no, and a maybe, I ultimately said, well, I'll give it a shot. I'll give you a 2-year commitment. And I joined the firm on a full-time basis back in 2015. Well, obviously, fast forward, and I'm about 6 months or 6 years into that process now. I'm truly enjoying what I call the second chapter of my career. So it really gives me an opportunity to stay engaged in the profession on a full-time basis. And I spent about half my time in executive recruitment and about a fourth of my time on doing strategic planning and strategic visioning and team building and workshops with councils and senior staff. And then about the other fourth of my time speaking at state and national conferences. And then I also sprinkle some other opportunities where I'm involved in helping our teams, involved in certain internal operations or assessments or studies and things of that nature. So I'm still pretty much very much engaged in working in communities, and I service a client base across the country. It's not based just in Florida, although I'm still based in Lakeland, Florida. So you can see my credentials, a master's in public administration as well as a bachelor's. And then, as I said, worked initially starting as a regional director in Florida to kind of launch Florida with SGR, but within a matter of months started servicing a national base of clients across the country. I thought it'd be helpful to describe to the folks that are tuned in tonight a little bit about what this process is all about, because it is a fairly elaborate process. I started off this evening saying it's one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, a council goes through. Because when you think about the fact that your councilors are elected as policymakers, but the day-to-day operations of the multifaceted services and the programs and the budgets that the town is involved with is really under the purview of the town manager. And so the council's collective and individual goals and aspirations and priorities and programs are all really dependent upon how well a manager is able to work with them as elected officials and then translate that into meaningful actions and programs and budgets and staffing to accomplish the goals and objectives that your elected officials have been elected by you as residents to carry out in your community. And so it is truly an important aspect. And most of the time, boards that are elected officials are not necessarily involved in recruiting and appointing and going through a process like this on a regular basis. They may do some of it with regards to their own employments and opportunities. You certainly have a council member that's involved in recruitment as well. So she's got a good feel for what this process is about. But most boards as a whole don't do this very often. And so we really appreciate the opportunity to work once again with Tolland to assist them in this effort. And so our effort really starts with this type of activity. I've already preliminarily have met with a variety of all your senior staff that report to the town manager. I've been having a series of conversations with the elected officials. I've got 2 more of those to finish up in the process. And we often meet with a variety of community stakeholders that want to provide input into this process, given the public nature of the position. And we've suggested in working with the town council as they were going through this effort that many times when we're doing these meetings, these position profile interview sessions, we're either in town or do it remotely as we're doing tonight, that we often facilitate these types of community meetings to allow the public to have a chance to weigh in on this effort as well. And the more we get of that, the better understanding it helps me as the recruiter and working on this project to make sure that I fully understand what's going on and the challenges and the issues, and I have a sense of the feel and just the ebb and the flow of what's taking place in your community and the challenges and the personalities of every place. You can imagine that communities provide similar services all across the country, but each community is somewhat unique, and the challenges and the opportunities and the projects that they're working on are going to be very also unique to the community. So the better I get an understanding of that, the better off as kind of the face of your recruitment process, when I'm engaging community or engaging prospective candidates and talking to folks, and as they go deeper into the search process, we'll talk about later, I'm able to probe and get a better feel for how they react to some of the things that we're going to be learning about through this effort as well. So it really starts with an effort that we're going to be kicking off tonight with you as community members. Then I'll talk a little bit about how we market the position. You've probably been watching a lot of information recently in the newspaper and reading information about what's referred to as the Great Resignation. And marketing in today's effort in the recruitment world, even in just the 6 years that I've been working with SGR in my current capacity, has changed dramatically. As we approach the world of the pandemic, in the third quarter of the pandemic last year, close to 30 million baby boomers retired. And that was about 3.2 million more than what had happened the year before, 2019. And if you look at the scenario, what's taking place now, more than 75 million baby boomers are retiring sooner than later. And from now until 2030, close to 10,000 baby boomers are going to reach retirement age every single day. And so that is certainly part of the challenge when you read about the Great Resignation and the great concern about what's happening in the recruitment market. Many that what we call the pig in the python of the baby boomer generation is finally moving out of the workplace at a rather fast pace. And there is a challenge in terms of getting the next generation into these roles of leadership, especially in high-level positions in the public sector arena. So I don't want to leave you with a negative aspect because it's just as a challenge, but it does represent a unique opportunity that we didn't face even as recently as a year ago, that we now are facing in the recruitment world as well. So what that means is that we really have to do an awful lot as recruiters to shake a lot of trees and to reach what we call passive candidates, folks that may not be thinking about looking at the job ads for their next opportunity. And we have to try to work with our contacts and our outreach and our media outreach efforts and our own social media marketing activities that it gets people to be aware of what's happening with regards to the opportunities that may be in a position that they may not otherwise be thinking about. Talk a little bit about our process as well. This is a very public process, and certainly in the age of the internet and the availability for people to look and see what's going on and host communities. We do a very extensive job in vetting to make sure that we fully understand candidates as they go deeper into the process. I'll say that I've described the process as we go through a recruitment. At the front end, we're going to know a little about a lot of candidates. As they move into semifinalists, we're going to learn more about them, and we'll get to a little deeper dive in terms of their background, their issues, and where they've been and what controversies they may have been involved with. And then by the time they become finalists, we're going to virtually know everything there is to know about those candidates. But you don't want to invest all your time and effort at the front end of the search. You kind of work your way down as you whittle through, and I'll go through those steps here shortly. And that really is a function as myself, as a former city manager. You never want to catch your board by surprise. You never want to catch your community by surprise. So we take that philosophy as we're doing recruitment activities as we go deeper into the searches so that nobody gets surprised. Because we know that you as engaged citizens are going to Google these candidates. Part of our effort by the time they're finalists is a full-blown criminal history, credit, academic review, stage 2 media searches, wherever they've worked as an adult. We're going to know everything there is about these folks, and there really is no surprises to be had, so nobody's caught off guard at the end. Beyond that, as I mentioned at the beginning, if we do our job right, which I think we do an excellent job at the front end of understanding your organization, the challenges, the issues, the dynamics, the culture of the community, we can convey that. As you can imagine, as candidates apply for positions like this, there's a lot of conversation I have with candidates and prospective candidates and folks that I'm reaching out to, and I can describe kind of the nature and the ebb and flow of a community. And I'm testing that as I'm engaging with candidates about whether I think they're a good fit or not, and whether their background or skill set may be a good fit for the challenges that you're facing there as well. So that understanding of us knowing it helps us to convey to the candidates so they can make a value decision as to whether they think it's something they want to pursue or not. And if they do, in a similar vein, they're not going to be caught off by surprise at the 11th hour about something that they didn't know about. So that's really the importance of us understanding this from the very start. And then this is something we do pretty regularly. As I mentioned, we're one of the largest public sector executive recruitment firms in the country. So We help work with cities and towns to help work through all the processes that take place. We try to make it as user-friendly as possible, not only for the community and the elected officials and the boards that we're working with, but also for the candidates, because it's a competitive, challenging marketplace out there right now. And we want them to be treated with fairness and respect and understand that they were evaluated fairly and effectively in this part of this effort. And that has certainly changed. I have done a lot of work in Connecticut in the past couple years, including a previous work with Tolland, as we'll discuss here shortly. And we've had to do some searches entirely remotely. We have a contract with the city of Hartford, for an example, and we've done several recruitments where those recruitment processes were done entirely remotely because they were in the heart of the COVID window. And not only myself nor candidates could come into town from out of state without being in a hotel for 10 days. And that obviously did not make sense operationally, financially, or otherwise. So we've had to kind of adjust that. So we're pretty adept at our feet. We have regional offices and had all the technology. And so when COVID hit, we really didn't miss a beat. We were able to continue to market going forward as well in a unique way. I mentioned earlier that I have had an opportunity to work in Tolland. I was involved as your recruiter in your last town manager search. I will say at the beginning, I'm sorry we're back doing this again. Normally our managers that we're involved with stay longer than a 2-year window, similar to what Mike Rosen had been with you. I will tell you the national average for town or for city managers across the country is 5 to 7 years. Now, that means that there are a lot of people that stay longer. In my previous post, I was 12 years in my last post and 15 years in my previous post as managers. But for every one of us that are kind of long-term, there's also ones that are shorter term. And so that 5 to 7 year window is something that we often see. And in smaller communities, for better or for worse, often is a quicker turnover. Many of the candidates that are managers in smaller communities are looking to progress into larger communities or different areas of the country. And so you will often see that. I know not your most recent manager, but your previous manager, Steve, had been there for many, many years. And sometimes that happens. Our goal is to try to find a fit in that effort. But we do have some skin in the game with you. If a manager, if the person that we're involved with completely goes through our processes and is ultimately selected and leaves within 18 months, we are redoing the search without a professional fee. And so we do have some skin in the game. We're trying to help you find the right person. And so, it's just not a job to us. We really don't want to be back doing this search again quickly. And we do stand behind that as a guarantee. Now, you were beyond that 18-month window with us, but we did in fact discount the services because we felt you were so close to that window. We wanted to assist in that effort as well. But I say that saying that I've got some background and knowledge because I've worked not only with you, but I've worked in a variety of surrounding communities and manager searches. And so we do certainly have an understanding of what's taking place in Connecticut and the challenges and the opportunities that the state faces, in addition to the unique opportunities you're facing there in Tolland. I did want to talk about, I mentioned earlier, we've been asked to do a national recruitment activity. You'll see the states that we're involved with in searches, and it's a pretty broad-based approach. We continually add new states, and once we land in a state, often we expand and do multiple searches over and over for other communities in and around it once they've kind of discovered us, so to speak. So that is something we'll do here as well. I will tell you that the profession of local government management is a mobile profession, and although every search that we do, typically the host state will generate the most applications. The fact is that we will generate a number of other applications from other places in the country. And it's part of our job in working with your town council and whatever search process you use to help understand that although someone may come from a different part of the country, culture and dynamics are important. And in some cases, they may have worked at one other time earlier in their career in the New England area or in Connecticut. They've moved around, as I say, it is a mobile profession. And at some point, I run into candidates that are looking to get back because they've got aging parents or they got kids or they got grandkids, or they want to finish out their career in that area, or they have just are moving up because they're used to being in a certain part of the region and want to stay in that region. So we'll encounter a little of all of that in this effort. And it's our job to help the council just understand the dynamics and the issues and the motivations of why some people are looking if they may be coming from a different part of the country as well. I talk a little bit about the importance of us reaching out and shaking the trees and finding what we call passive candidates. And this slide really hasn't changed. Even in the 6 years I've been with SGR, we track this year to year, and it really has not changed much, which I think this speaks positive to the work that we do. That although when we're ready to launch this position, and we'll talk about the timeline here shortly, our effort is to really shake a lot of trees, engage passive candidates, and get folks plugged into networks that they may not otherwise be thinking about an opportunity like Tolland. And so that includes efforts like we have an effort that we send out every Tuesday morning that goes out to close to 50,000 people. It's called our 10 and 10 Servant Leadership newsletter. It goes out across the country. It has 10 links of stories involving local government issues of topics of interest that many folks will share with the departments and discuss. But it also identifies our upcoming and current searches. So you get featured in that. So that's 50,000 people that are seeing this. Now, not all of them are active employees, but many of them are active candidates, but many of them will know someone and they'll forward that on to someone else and be able to capture it. In addition to that, we're very active in the social media, our email outreaches, our personal contracts, the networks that we develop in this business. You will certainly attract a number of folks, and we'll recommend you have placements of ads in national and state trade associations. The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, the towns and municipalities, the various state associations, the national associations called the International City County Management Association, things of that nature. We certainly will recommend you place an ad in because it'll open up your footprint to the position. And then you'll have other people that will certainly be involved and see other sources through personal referrals or contacts, or somebody knows of the opportunity and pass it on that doesn't hear from us. But what we have consistently found is those people that are ultimately selected as semifinalists, not just the original applicants, but those that the councils or the communities we're working with want to learn more about and potentially will become finalists at some point, have heard about this position through something that SGR has done. As you can see, almost 2/3 of the applications come through that door. So that's the value of what we also bring in addition to understanding the position and helping go through a process, is the network and the reach that we have to make sure people are aware of this opportunity. So that importance of social media, as I mentioned, if you do any work or you go to our website, you'll start to see some things. This is just some information. We find that the growth of social media is so important to doing marketing, just as you saw in that previous slide. Most organizations are doing that to a greater extent. We certainly are in that capacity as well. And then this next chart over to the right, you think that 75% of studies have indicated that people that are currently employed don't really consider themselves as active candidates. So if they don't know about a position and not going to a job board or a website to look for a job, how do they know about that? And so how do we end up doing that? And that we do that through, you'll see these, our Facebook page, our 10 and 10 newsletter that I mentioned, the LinkedIn, Instagram, the job blast that we send out. We have individuals that sign up for certain types of positions, and they want to get every week a notice of if there is an opportunity in city management, for example. And so there's close to 4,300 folks that get those in the city and town management and county management operations. So this job will get posted to those folks. And although those are more active candidates, the same thing goes, I mentioned earlier. They may not be looking at this position, but they'll know somebody in the profession and they'll forward it on to someone else who may be a passive candidate as well. In our process, all these ads will look and feel differently based upon the format and the platform we're using. We actually have a social media marketing expert that knows and studies when candidates and folks are typically looking at websites and looking at their Twitter feeds and all the other things, so that we can get the most management focus on opportunities such as what we got here in Tolland. So our process, just so you're aware, is very thorough. This is not something where you just kind of throw some ads out there and you bring a few people in a couple of weeks and then you've got a next manager on board. This is a highly visible project or prospect. It's someone that's engaged in your community. It involves the public trust. And so our process is pretty thorough in terms of vetting them. And it starts with what we've been doing to date and what we're doing this evening. And that gets the operational inquiry and the analysis. And that's where we start to learn more about the position, the dynamics, and develop what's called a position profile brochure, where we'll market the position. As I mentioned earlier, once that's been approved and ready to go by the town council, we'll recommend where those ads be placed, and we'll actually market the position. And for about a 30-day window, we'll be involved in managing that process as candidates are coming into the process, and we're discussing it and reaching out and talking to prospective candidates, and then managing their applications as they come forward. And then when the position closes, we'll be evaluating those, and we'll break them off into proper candidates that we think are higher prospects for success based upon what's been included in the position profile brochure and the qualification, the experience, and the hard, the soft skills, and the education. And the council then will ultimately select typically somewhere between 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 folks that they want to learn more about. And those are considered semifinalists. And those folks then go through a process of completing a pretty detailed questionnaire about their background, why they left their previous positions, why they're interested in this particular position. We will sprinkle in a variety of questions that will deal specifically with the challenges and issues you're facing there, so we can there in Tolland, so we can see how they're going to relate to their background and their skills and their experience, and how they would apply those to those things that are viewed as essential issues and matters that the town is going to be facing in the next several years. We'll ask about their management style. We'll ask about why they left their previous positions. We're going to also ask them if they've, if there's anything in their background that we should know about that could be of concern to a future employer. We always give them that opportunity first. We'll ask them about if they're hired, what their general salary and benefit expectations would be, so that we can get a sense of making sure that they're within the market range of what the town is likely to pay for this position. And we'll also start, although when I'm evaluating candidates and triaging them through this effort and reviewing with the council, we'll start what we call a stage 1 media search, which is a LexisNexis kind of database of the last 3 to 5 years of where they've appeared in the newspaper. So we can review that vis-a-vis what they've told us about what their background has been or any concerns they've been involved with. Then what we do is we'll also have those candidates participate in pre-recorded video interviews. We normally ask our candidates to answer 3 or 4 different questions, one way, not two way like we are this evening. And those are high-level questions, really to give a sense for the council to get a sense of how they present themselves. And then what we'll do is we'll package their cover letters, their resumes, their questionnaire responses, and the links to the video interviews, and those will be sent to the council. We give the council a little while to review that material, and then we're back working with the council to review those semifinalists, those 8 to 10 or 12 folks that are selected. And then that'll get narrowed down to typically somewhere between 3 to 5 folks that they're interested in bringing in as finalists for an interview process, an on-site interview process. And from there, the work doesn't finish for those candidates. At that point, we ask them to complete what's called a first-year game plan, which is a written response of if they're appointed to the position as town manager, what they'll do in their first 30, 60, 90, 120 days, 180 days, and then the balance of the first year. And then we'll work with your town council to develop some sort of presentation, whether it's on their first year game plan or it's on their challenges and opportunities or something else, because the nature of the position of a town manager is whoever's appointed will make a lot of public presentations. So we normally have some sort of presentation format exercise, if you will, that'll be involved in that effort as part of the interview process. We'll work with the town to develop questions with senior staff and any stakeholders that may be involved in, as well as the town council. And modify those based upon anything that any of those groups may want to do. We'll also do criminal history credit, background checks, verification of education, find out if there's anything in their effort that would be of concern through a much more detailed stage 2 media search. And then also certainly complete all the reference checks. So at the end of the day, all that will be done so that there will be no surprises. Any questions or issues could be addressed as part of the interview process. And then we will help the council negotiate an agreement and get your candidate brought on board and complete the process. So it's a fairly extensive effort. The typical window of time is about 12 weeks from the time the council gives us the authority to officially launch the job and start advertising, and we start accepting applications to the time candidates are in town interviewing is normally about a 3-month process, give or take holidays, give or take schedules and things of that nature. So we'll develop a schedule that the town will approve and we'll just run that process, but typically think about 3 months. So realistically, we'll be launching, I would anticipate, probably sometime the latter part of this month. We got the holidays, so we may look for a little longer period because not much happens during that week between Christmas and New Year's in terms of applicants applying. But think about into March, beginning of April is more than likely when your candidates would be in town in a general rule. But we'll work that through with the council and finalize the schedule. So some of the things we've done to date, as I mentioned, we've been involved in meeting with a variety of town councilors and senior staff members. That work continues. We hope to get that wrapped up this week. Many of you may have participated. If you're not, I want you to be aware of the fact there is the town. We work with Michael Wilkinson to develop questions and issues. And I think, Michael, I think you said there's been a couple hundred people that have participated. But I've given the link there. If you haven't seen it, it's on the town's home webpage, and you can just query that. But if you go to a couple links, you'll be able to find it. And that's been up and running since mid-November. And so there's an opportunity for you to also provide some additional feedback on that. We certainly have the evening tonight for the community forum to get some additional feedback and perspectives. And then I also know that although I've been talking with your town councilors about their goals and priorities and things that are important to them and that they're likely going to be involved on the radar screen of your next manager, I also know that your interim manager, Lisa, and the town council and staff are now working on some goals and priorities. And those will likely be finalized, and we'll be able to incorporate that into the position profile brochure that we'll use to market the opportunity. And then, although we've not worked this out, most of our searches, because of the public nature of town managers, most of our communities want to do some sort of meet and greet so that the community has an opportunity to engage and meet folks. And the candidates that are ultimately invited in as finalists, and there's an opportunity for you to engage and provide some feedback to your elected officials who ultimately will be the ones making this decision. And I suspect we've done that in most of our searches, and I suspect we'll know more about that as we go deeper as to what that looks like. But there'll be an opportunity at the tail end to also be involved, I think, in some way, shape, or form and provide some input into this process, into the selection process. So with that as a background, let me stop there first and maybe just open up if there's any questions about the processes that I've outlined or anything of that nature before I kind of open up a series of questions that I want to engage with the participants tonight and allow them to jump in and react to some of the questions that we have as part of our background work. So I'll open it up, and I think, Michael, I don't know if you or Steve are managing the process, but I'll just let me know when there's a question, or if I'll how I handle that at this end.
Thank you, Doug. So yeah, we will indicate if anyone is on Zoom, if they want to raise their hand with the raise hand icon. Otherwise, if you're on the phone, it's *9, and then you just state your name and address, and then you can direct questions. And if you're in the audience, you can also stand up and state your name and address if you'd like. All right, I see Christina Ford. I'll ask you to unmute, followed by Rini Bisa.
Hello, how are you? Christina Ford, 101 Metcalf Road. Thanks for doing this. I had a few things I wanted to say. I don't know if this is the place. Not too many questions. I was just thinking about what you said with the past search and how that manager left us so soon. I just really think that we need someone not so involved in the politics of town, or realizing that they know how tough it is to be a town employee in Tolland, and kind of keep the politics out of it. Definitely someone that's financially responsible, avoiding bonding where we can, mitigating for fund balance use, and really just setting up Tolland for success, no matter who's in the elected seats. Obviously, transparency and maybe more community involved. I know Mr. Werbner in the past was pretty involved with the community, and Superintendent Willett on our side on the Board of Ed is very involved with the community. So definitely a hot button from me. Good relationship with the superintendent, and willing to work with the council on what went wrong with the last search. Perhaps the person needs to live in Tolland, or a contract. I don't know if that's possible, but I think that's my long list of things I wanted to say. I'll relinquish the floor to anyone else that wants to speak.
Good. And I captured those. I'm gonna those some of the and that's fine. I'll capture what you said. I am going to ask a series of questions that will kind of get to those points. So
Okay.
bear with me. There may be some other
All
things as well. I wanted to first, at least initially, just make sure everybody stood what the process was about, and then from there get into the attributes and some of the challenges. But appreciate the feedback. I will also tell you, I don't know that. As I said, the average tenure is that 5 to 7 years just in the response. I don't know if the search went bad last time. At some point, you have to also understand that, and I can say this from a national perspective, it was a unique opportunity for newly placed managers with COVID hitting relatively soon afterward because they were working remotely and the world changed and all those sort of things factored. So we have seen a number of folks in the business because of COVID and just the challenges that brought kind of reconsider whether they want to do what they're presently doing. Your previous manager did go to accept a position back in a larger community as an assistant. He was an assistant manager before. This would have been his first manager role. And ultimately decided to take another role back as an assistant in a larger community. So I don't want to imply that there was necessarily a problem. It does happen, but I think I've had an opportunity to talk a little bit with that manager at a recent ICMA conference, and I know a lot of factors go into that consideration, and certainly I know COVID and the challenges that brought certainly created some of the impact there. So other questions about the search process before we get into kind of the nature of the the attributes and things that are taking place in the community? Because I certainly that's part of what we're going to do as well. But this was kind of a natural landing spot before we got into those other questions.
I see Rini B saw your hand is up if you had any comments or questions similar to that line.
No, mine are probably more towards some other just feedback. So maybe I should hold off.
Okay. Kenneth Trice.
Good evening, and thank you for doing this. Kenny Trice, 53 Doe Run. So my question to you is, are you looking for a manager or are you looking for a leader?
I can respond to that in terms of, Kenneth, what we'll do is, based on the feedback that we're getting from all the players and participants, including the community, is that'll develop a profile of the type of person we're looking for. And that includes not just their hard skills about having financial acumen and understanding municipal budgets and the diversity of services we do. It's really those traits and characteristics of the ideal candidate. And you're absolutely right. There are managers that are by the book managers. There are managers that are very strong in management, but also are very visionary in leadership and are very outgoing. We can find the individual for the community. There's always a right manager candidate for every community. The question is pairing what the community, the elected officials, the staff, and the community is looking for with the traits of the candidates that are applying for the position. And so the nature, I will tell you from somebody who's been in this position, it's hard to be an effective manager if you're not a good leader, because you do have to lead the organization. You have to be engaged with elected officials and community stakeholders, and you're in the middle of a lot of controversial issues, and you're helping try to find common ground and consensus using skills and abilities and training you've got and expertise. And so I think they're very symbiotic. You have to be a good manager and administrator, but you also typically have to be a leader. But ultimately, that's the community and the council, and this decision is to the type of candidate they want to hire, if that makes sense. I don't make that selection. I help guide in the process. And once they tell me what they're looking for, help them through. These are candidates that I think best meet those goals and expectations. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Because unfortunately, a lot of people sometimes think that they're the same thing. And I personally do not. I think that there's a difference between being a manager and also being a leader. And you did, articulate that what you were looking for could be a combination of the two. So that's why I asked the question, because I think that's a strategic position to be in. But thank you for your answer.
Right. By all means, it's somewhat of a misnomer when they're called the manager, because they think it's all management skills, which it clearly is a component of the job. Don't get me wrong, but it's much more than that. Most effective town managers, city managers, county managers are very strong leaders in and of their own rights, as you've identified. Absolutely. Well, any other questions about the process? If not, I don't see any other hands raising unless I don't know. I think I've got everybody on my screen, but Steve or Mike, do you see anybody else before I go into the community questions?
It should be good to proceed.
You're good? Okay. All right. Well, as I mentioned, the first question I want to pose to the participants tonight is you're all residents of the community, and as we market this position to candidates who may not know anything about Tolland, these are those passive candidates I spoke about earlier. I always like to ask the question, what is it about Tolland that makes it special? What is it that's unique? And why have you selected to live in this community for whatever time? Some of you are long-term residents, I suspect. Some of you are relatively short-term, but you've all made a decision to locate in Tolland. And so as I'm engaging with candidates about telling them about Tolland, I've got a feel for it, but I always like to ask the question in a group meeting like tonight, what is it that makes Tolland so special? And why are you there as a resident in Tolland and have chosen to either stay or recently move to the community? So I'll open that up for questions or comments.
And again, if you'd like to raise your hand, don't be shy. Otherwise, *9 if you're on a mobile device. All right, I see Sophia Johnson. I'll ask you to unmute.
Thank you so much, Sophia Johnson, 48 Crystal Lake Road. And the only reason why I'm answering is because I had the opportunity to be a new resident here to Tolland. And while I was looking for a place to live, during COVID, everyone was home. Everyone was home. And in all of the places that I looked at, Tolland, everyone was engaging and outside. So driving around and taking a look at the community, eye contact from within a vehicle and people walking in the streets, whether it was groups of kids or people walking their dogs, they all said hello. It was an odd thing, but it was something that I moved from New York recently, and I have to say that it was outstanding to see how everyone was outside. It was like a Rockwell moment for each corner that I turned. And I, visited a lot of places in Connecticut while I was looking. And even with COVID, winding down and things, with people still, not so much home anymore with kids going back to school, that engagement still exists. So driving around town and eye contact, like I said, from vehicle to sidewalk, it's greeted with a hello and a smile. It seems that something like this would not exist. And Tolland it's an incredible community, incredible community. And I recently stated that it's nothing in life is perfect, but it's perfect enough. And that's what I love about Tolland the most, meaning and I have to share this, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but the town that I moved from, 2 plants just closed down where 111 people union employees have to look for work within the beginning of the year. And the process to notify the town, the community, and the workers was heartbreaking for me. And I tried to stay out of the old groups that I was in social media, but I do agree with you. They are incredibly important in being able to get, although it's a fishbowl, the most vocal people, they say the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and the most vocal people that I found have been in social media. And when I posted that 111 people lost their job, it was met with, well, you win some, you lose some. There's plenty of jobs out there. And it broke me to see that there wasn't any compassion. And as a new resident to Tolland, I've had to rely on the community in many different ways so far. And the compassion is outstanding. It's overwhelming sometimes. It seems unbelievable. But in that way, it makes Tolland the unique place so that when everyone says Tolland deserves, Tolland deserves, Tolland deserves, it clearly does, because everyone that's here knows that we deserve the best. And that resonates with each interaction that I've had. And even in the ones that don't seem to be positive, people are very passionate about what they believe in Tolland, and I love it. And I was shocked to see that, Mr. Rosen left, and my only concern would be that, anyone that would come may not understand or appreciate it without having lived here. But I met people that were in New York for a few days, and they just ran into them at the red and white. and their first thing that they said that they found something special about Tolland. So I'm open to knowing that there's people that may come in from outside and be able to see it. And if they see it, I can't imagine that they would ever want to leave. So that's the whole thing. Like, and then for people that have lived in Tolland, may not realize, they might not have been to somewhere else, and they may not have seen what's so great about living here. But I can say only and speak only for myself that, it's been something where I've lived in Canada, different places in Canada, different places in the Midwest, lived in New York. And even for Canada, it does not compare to Tolland. Tolland is a community that represents what should be a benchmark across the country, because at least in that, with the differences and diversity, if we could have that, there will at least be people that are happy to be home. When you leave work and you're upset at work, and then you come home and you're upset in your community, that has to suck. So leaving work and coming home and driving down the street, and the peace and quiet and the hospitality, that's what makes Tolland special. Is that, I guess, to say Tolland cares. Tolland really does care about the things that affect our community, and they're not afraid to voice their concerns and to be active. And that's what I find is special about Tolland. And they're inclusive, and they're loving, and they're compassionate. I can go on forever, but like I said, I've been here since February, and I'm very happy, and I feel very fortunate to be in this community. So
Great.
Thank you for letting me ramble.
Thank you for the feedback. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Sophia. And we have next Bob Rubino, followed by Kate Ballo.
Thank you, Steve. Bob Rubino, 296 Weigold. I guess maybe I read this meeting invite a little bit different, and that I was looking forward as an opportunity to provide input on the selection criteria of the town council person.
We will, Bob, we will get to that. I've got a series of questions. Maybe what I'll do, let me just put all these out so you can see the questions I do want to ask about. So yeah, that's certainly, I was just going to take them in order, but if you want to jump in, I don't want to hold you off on that. I'll be glad to take some of the other feedback, as I suspect some of the other questions would be what you're doing.
Thank you for that. I kind of see this as kind of a virtual yellow sticky note exercise where we throw up our top three, and you would roll these up into maybe what the profile of the candidate might look like. Mm-hmm. So, I applaud the council for doing that, because in my opinion, the town manager is the single most important person in town that kind of sets the tone of the community. This is a person whose tenure, hopefully, is much longer than any elected council person or council majority. So picking a town manager that fits with a particular majority's philosophy, in my opinion, is a bit of a fool's errand. This person needs to be apolitical. I had written this kind of sentiment to the council members at large, and they have a copy of that in front of them. But my three most important criteria really comes down to three things that I've seen in good managers in private industry as well as in the public sector. The first being emotional intelligence. The second being mentorship. And then the third, when I look at the problems plaguing Tolland today and probably in the next 10, 20 years, is we need a person with regional reach and influence. So let me take each of these apart a little bit. On emotional intelligence, the manager for the town is a unique skill mix. It's a person that should be able to lead with professional expertise, but also be able to walk in other people's shoes as a bit of an empath, because they're answering to, in spite of their advanced degrees in municipal administration, they're answering to very capable people who are not trained in that. And what I've seen over the years is a little bit of a behavioral response of a pendulum swing between a person who's what I'll call a minion of the council or a secretive autocrat. So we've had 4 town managers, and they've been pretty much spread across those 2 poles of behavior. And the minion, they tend not to last very long. And in my observation, tend not to be great managers of their direct reports. They just roll over. The staff will run roughshod on them. The autocrat, well, he's not going to politically survive because he serves at the pleasure of the council. So that gets me to the next point, mentorship. By that, I mean a person who can challenge and act as almost a force multiplier of excellence, not of just their staff, but also the council, to be a trusted, respected partner in mentoring a council on what it is to lead a municipality. And when I look at the challenges facing 21 Tolland Green, half of the manager's direct reports are looking at retirement. So we need a town manager who can mentor and coach and develop the resources that we have at hand as part of a succession plan. And if that's not existent, to recruit, rebuild, and rekindle a highly effective town staff. And then lastly, when I talk about regional reach and influence, I'll take a play out of Steve Werdner's playbook. That when we were faced with the crumbling concrete foundation issue, he was a key player in Hartford. And rather than being a lone wolf in the wilderness, he worked with neighboring municipalities to bring the critical political mass, if you will, to get attention. He did the same thing when Hartford had a brainiac idea of eliminating local tax on private vehicles. That would have been a disaster for Tolland. And going forward, I think Tolland is going to be faced with the same issues that have regional solutions. And if we don't find a person who, through charisma, charm, or whatever, we're going to be facing some unsustainable issues with the town. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Very, very insightful comments. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, this is Lou Luba. I'm just, as a point of order, that the discussions that we have on the agenda, it's supposed to be about 3 minutes. I'm not trying to limit anybody and their discussions at all, but I think that considering that we have about 45 people online tonight, that if we want to get through everybody, that if we can just be mindful of that 3-minute limit, just reminding the chair and Mr. Thomas here. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, no, that is a good point to reiterate, is that there is sort of a 3-minute limit. We do want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak, so just being mindful of that time is appreciated. But with that being said, I believe we have Kate Vallow, followed by Philip Dooley and Rini Besaw.
Hey there. Thank you for asking for some comments, and I will try to be mindful of time. I will just add 3 chairs for emotional intelligence. Thank you for bringing that up, Bob Rubino. And I was really appreciative of hearing that mentioned early on when you were talking about what's important, that it's not just about the hard skills, it's about the soft skills too. So thank you for that. I am just going to answer your first question. So hopefully that's fine. So the greatest selling points about living, working, and raising a family in Tolland, what brought our family here was a combination of an excellent school system, very high quality education, with caring professionals who, come to find out not only are they great schools, but they have some of the best teachers and administrators around, really wonderful leadership, and it just seems to keep getting better. And also our understanding that the town was really committed to conservation efforts. It's a really beautiful community. It's got that pastoral charm, and it's got really great efforts towards conservation. So thank you. to the chair here tonight, and actually Mr. Rubino, who just spoke, for their efforts to that end, and so many other folks. What I learned once we were here is that there's also a really admirable commitment to a balance of preservation and progress in the town as well. So we have this gorgeous historical district that has been lovingly tended over time. With, our town green is a really cherished area, and people are very thoughtful about it and are able to collaborate nicely on what will be good there. And at the same time, there's a commitment to progressing socially. It's an open and affirming community. And there is a commitment to growing diversity. So all those things are things that I think are great about this town. Just kind of glancing down at your list here, one of the challenges I think that has come up, so I'll just echo, is that, politics are no fun. And we're not immune from the national scene, right? So you see that stuff at the local level too, with some division. And I would really be looking for somebody who, I'll echo this idea of being apolitical, but also who has an ability to bring people together and really, we don't all have to think the same, but we all need to make sure that we're having our voices heard. Make sure there's a platform for that, and that our representatives are representing all of us, no matter where they stand as well. So. Thanks.
Thanks. Let me just jump in on the apolitical comment, just to provide some context for folks. Most of your candidates that are going to be applying for this position are going to be members of the International City County Management Association. It's our trade association, if you will. And there is a code of ethics that we voluntarily subscribe to as members of ICMA. And part of that is the fact that we have to be like the Swiss in this position. We really have to be apolitical. And so regardless of which political party may be in power, or the individual, the mayor, or in your case, chairperson, or what have you, we have a philosophy that everyone gets the information together. Nobody gets treated differently. They get it at the same sorts of time, that sort of effort. And we really can, and if you become very political in this position, and we don't advocate for candidates, we don't participate in, other than by voting, we don't, typically managers do not participate in fundraisers or political signs, things of that nature, but for efforts in which the town council has authorized, like a bond issue or a referendum. That's the nature of this job, because just as was pointed out by one of your previous speakers, parties will change back and forth, and you have to learn to work with whoever's in office, and in your case, every 2 years. And then also folks are, if you're working at the state or the national level to advance for a policy or a project or a grant, if you're affiliated with one party, you're not going to have the same ability to advocate on your community's behalf. So just the nature of this job is very much intended to be an apolitical position as a professional manager. So I just wanted to throw that out for the benefit of the audience tonight as well.
Really appreciate that. Thank you so much for saying that. Can I ask a follow-up on that specifically? Is that okay? Do you find that you're, so there is one thing to just be entirely neutral, and it's another thing to have some skills around effective collaboration. So can you speak to that a little bit? Bringing people together?
Certainly.
Thanks.
And it's one of the questions I've been asking your council members, and especially because different councils have different expectations of their manager. The manager, being in that, quote, apolitical position, is an ability to bring forth some, with training and expertise and understanding of the municipal operation, and hopefully has some insights and foresight about what could go right or what can go wrong with a given course of action. I mean, we tend to be trained in that approach, and different managers have different abilities to have that foresight. But in the same focus, because I've joked as somebody who's been in city management for a long time, I've joked with many of my councils that many of them have been 5 or 7 or 9 folks, and say at any given time, 5 or 7 or 9 could have 18 or 19 different thoughts on the same topic, and they may not all be aligned. So the role of the manager often is to try to find where that common ground can be, and be as inclusive as possible to bring as many of the players together. And many councils like that in their manager, to help them do that. So they, because they're doing it in a part-time basis, and your manager is a full-time, and they're, invested in the organization. So That's a skill set that I always ask communities what they're looking for, and if they want a manager that has that kind of what boardsmanship skills, if you will, and if that's desired or not desired. And the feedback I've gotten so far has been very much that they think that's an important element, just the nature of the business. So that's for 2 cents on the response questionnaire.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. So next we have Philip Dooley, followed by Rini Busat, and then Jeff. You, Phil? Right.
Yes, this is Philip Dooley. I'm at 192 Goose Lane in Tolland on a back lot. And yes, I agree that the future town manager has to be, above all, a good manager. But since I don't think anybody else is going to bring it up, it is vitally important that they not deny the unequivocal science of human-caused global warming and the disastrous effects on our economy, our health, and our lifetime that this is going to have. That we only have 9 years left now to cut our fossil fuel use in half. Because we've dilly-dallied for 30 years and not done hardly any, we've just increased our fossil fuel use. So this is, we can't look at the federal government having to do all this. Tolland, every town has to do it over the whole world. For instance, there should be no new fossil fuel powered vehicles purchased by the town ever again, except for plowing the snow. There's no way to do that with batteries that I see. There should be no structures that are not heated, at least 50% by heat pumps, because that only costs like $300 to $500 more on a typical residence, more than central air conditioning. To just have that air conditioning be reversible. It's just a reversing valve and a defroster. And very few people seem to realize this. And the town manager can be instrumental to getting this information out to people. Right now, there is no law, blocking this, and the town, I don't think, can interfere with the state building code all by itself, though that I think some other towns in the country are doing that, and they're blocking new natural gas connections, for instance. So there's a lot of things that the town manager can be instrumental to help reduce both the town government and the town residents' use of fossil fuels. Half of our schools now have heat pumps. However, we missed out on the high school and the elementary school. We now have to pay much more now to have these converted to heat pump operation. Very few of our residents that I know of, this doesn't get into the public record how many, so I have no idea. And I haven't heard of any electric vehicles in the town fleet. And since most of these vehicles don't have to go very far, it's an ideal application, and also for all of the school buses to be electric. This will also make our kids healthier. I'll put in a little plug also. Our children should be getting organic food at school, but that costs more. Whereas everything else I'm discussing doesn't necessarily cost more. So that's a harder thing to push.
Sorry to interject, Phil. We were kind of at the 3-minute cap. I gave an extra 30 seconds. If you could summarize your comments, that would be appreciated.
Okay, I'm all set. Thank you for letting
you have
me
more
talk.
from the second round. We just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak once or twice. So, all right. Thank you, Phil. I don't know if there's any additional response to some of those comments, or if you have any insight in terms of town manager leadership in regards to climate change and other issues.
Sure, I can react. And I appreciate, I will tell you, I mentioned I do a lot of strategic planning with a lot of different communities, and environmental sustainability is a platform that many communities have adopted at the local level, similar to what your last speaker had raised. I do want to drive the issue that obviously there are communities and local governments across the country, in many cases, are leading and trying to deal with the climate change issues and the impact on their local communities, whether it's sea level rise or what have you, carbon reductions, things of that nature. Part of what you're addressing, though, in your previous speaker, this is where the role of manager can be an advisor and an insight to your elected officials. But most of what you've just identified are really policy calls of the council. The council really sets the tone through a strategic vision, a direction, a goal, or whatever, that if they want to reduce their carbon footprint or whatever that may look like, and then the manager's tasked to helping achieve that goal and can have some insight as to what's probably practical and the cost, so that as that conversation is occurring. But it's unlikely that the manager in and of himself or herself will be able to drive that change by themselves, because what you're raising are significant policy questions that ultimately are the role of the council to establish. And if the council says we want to reduce our carbon footprint and establish a variety of goals, or we want to be carbon neutral, or whatever that may look and feel like, the manager can help implement that and can be part of guiding that conversation, but can't do that in and of themselves. It really is going to be a policy question. So it's just kind of a teaching point there, that's really a conversation as a council, as far as the direction and the goals of the organization. The managers can be part of that conversation, but can't drive that entirely by himself or herself.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. So it looks like Rini Bisa, followed by Jeff.
Thank you. Rini Bisa, 230 Grant Hill Road. I was going to try to kind of go through the questions here, but I will say that I wanted to tag on a little bit to Christina Plord's notion that it feels like the prior town manager was a bit of a failure. And that is mainly because, we put a lot of time and effort into trying to include him and getting him in with the town, and then to have him leave so quickly, there just seems like a lot of, I don't want to say wasted resources, but sort of lost resources maybe. And that's difficult. And now here we are back at the wheel again. So just wanted to throw that in. I understand that you said it wasn't a waste, but it feels problematic. In terms of what are the greatest selling points about living here, I've been here for 2 years. I cannot answer that question. So that is problematic for me. I don't know if it's because it's a little more rural here or what it is, but I've been on the Board of Ed for 2 years and I still feel a little disconnected sometimes. I do feel like one of the greatest challenges facing the town at this time is some of the political divisiveness. There are a group of people, and I think that's fairly typical in every town. There's people who are very invested and very vocal, and then there's way more people who are not. So to bring the group together and try to get everybody together, I feel like that would be a huge win. From coming from another community to now living here, it feels rough here, and I would love for it to feel differently here. So that would be my feedback there. Should a candidate with no number 6? I would say no to that. I think we need someone who's got some experience and who is comfortable in that role, because I think we maybe already went down the road of maybe someone without that, and it didn't pan out well. That's just my feedback. I don't know. I'm not well in the weeds of it, but I do think that the town manager should live in town. I feel like that gives them, a little bit of skin in the game, and I think it gives them an opportunity to know people and have a little bit more connectivity. So that would be my feedback around that question. And as far as what would I like to see the successful candidate accomplish, there's a lot of things. I do feel like we need some fiscal oversight, responsibility, maybe rejigging of some of our thought process around that, and get us on a debt diet a little bit, and start being more fiscally responsible around paying for our assets and sustainability and those types of things. So that would be my feedback.
Okay. Any additional insight for that?
Just in the point, I guess I'll react to two different points there. Your last. So let me set the table. It's my job as a recruiter. I think I mentioned this to one of your council members this week. It's my job to help set the table of your candidates that you ultimately select as semifinalists and finalists. It's ultimately the council's job to select who they want to invite to dinner, so to speak, as semifinalists and finalists. So what I would tell you is, as we went through this process in the last round, your candidates that went through that effort as semifinalists and finalists were all involved in local government operations. They did not come from the private sector. I went back and looked over my notes. They have been involved. Some have been managers, some have been elected officials, and others. But they have been embedded. They didn't come without any private or public sector experience in the arena. So I just want to highlight that. Your previous manager was previously an assistant manager. So this would have been his first town manager position. And everyone comes to some point in their career when they're ready to make that transition. And most of the time that sticks and that works. And so that's the nature of the game. But ultimately what we're trying to do is, once again, we're evaluating the position profile brochure and then trying to figure out the best people that fit into that. But ultimately the selection of those folks, we're helping an advisor, but ultimately it's the commission's choice of who they select as individuals, as finalists and semifinalists. The point on your with regards to residency, and I have, as I mentioned, I've been a manager all my life prior to the work that I'm doing with SGR in the last 6 years. I have always lived in the community in which I've resided or that I've worked. It's a tough enough job, I will tell you. You get arrows slung at you in this position. Any rate increase, any tax increase, any program, if you're not participating in it, it's just one more quiver and an arrow that can be shot at you as a manager. And so there are many managers like myself that would never manage a community that they don't live in, because it's just part of being the fabric of the community and being engaged and getting to know the people and things of that nature. So I can make that argument, and I've been in that role myself personally, but I can also make an argument, especially in smaller communities that are outside of urbanized area, that it does have an impact on the number of candidates who may ultimately apply. And the reason you think about that is that you may have trailing spouses, you may have their family and kids that are later in high school and they don't want to move their kids out of their high school before they finish it, or whatever the circumstance would be, where they may have where both the family members are commuting to different locations. If they move to one, it may create an untenable situation for the spouse to have to go to a further distance. So I'm going to be the Swiss on this one. Personally, I like residency, as I've said myself. But I will tell you, if you don't do it, if you allow folks from within a reasonable commuting distance, 30, 45 minutes, whatever that may look and feel like, or residency is desired but not required, you will have a broader pool of candidates because of the factors that I just raised. Now, certainly if somebody's moving from out of state, that's a different circumstance. As opposed to candidates that may be in the greater Hartford area that's saying, listen, I'm interested in the job, but I can't pick up and move because now my spouse has to drive an hour and a half versus both of us doing 30-minute commutes or something like that. So that's the plus and minus, and that's going to be ultimately a policy call of the council. But just as a recruiter, I can tell you that's kind of the perspective on those factors for
you. We'll go to Jeff, followed by Karen, and then Kate.
Good evening, Jeff Rose, 427 Buff Cap Road here in town. Obviously, we want someone who has a vested interest in our community. We would probably want someone to live in town if possible. Obviously, the surrounding area may be acceptable depending on, but I think my comments tonight are probably directed more towards the council, sir, than you from the hiring firm. Lisa Hancock, who has done, in my opinion, a phenomenal job. I think you guys truly need to consider her based off of what she's done for the community and the vested interest that she does have. She's involved. She knows the inner workings. Rather than hiring someone from across the country to fly over here and learn the community, she knows the community, and she has all of the contacts, and she's able to meet with these folks. So, that's something that we definitely need to keep in mind. And I understand that we can go cross country here, but rather than cross country, keep it local. The local people know this community better than anyone. I've lived here 40 years, and I've seen a lot of folks come and go, and I think that some of the best folks are right here in this community. So something to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
And Jeff, Steve, if I can maybe just jump in on that, and just to give you a perspective of that, I appreciate the comment, Jeff. And we're a partner with your town, and so there are times when we're involved in searches and we have internal candidates. I certainly have met Lisa, and in fact I spoke with her just a couple of weeks ago about the work that she's doing and her interest in the position as well. And so I'll tell you what I've told her, that in many cases we go through a process of a recruitment, and we go through a semifinalist effort where they're evaluating candidates, and maybe an interim or an internal candidate is evaluating that process. And then after they've kind of reviewed the background that I mentioned earlier, the questionnaires, the video interviews, the media searches, their responses to their resumes and application materials, I've had several searches where you go, listen, we've kicked the stones, we've looked at it, we think our internal candidate's the right person, and we have no qualms about that. They've done their due diligence. And I've always encouraged, don't take this process further if you think you have the right person. So that's always an option. Don't feel that just because we're engaged to your consultant, we've got to go to the nth degree. I've had multiple searches where we've done that due diligence in the review, and they've been very satisfied and said, no, we're going to suspend the search, and we're totally comfortable with that. Well, our job is to help you find the best person for the job, and that may or may not be someone that's there, but it certainly is something that's happened in other searches.
Thank you, Doug. So next is Karen Moran, followed by Kate Howard-Bender, John Crickmore, and I think Rini for a second time.
Yes, hi, Karen Moran, 50 Merlot Way. I won't address all of the questions here, but I just wanted to say, I think that there should be a strong focus on communication skills, and we should have someone in that leadership position that can speak matter-of-factly and expertly around things involving the community, especially municipal funding. Someone who can speak, like I said, matter-of-factly, but in a neutral way, and not in a way that is creating fear in the community around the budget and the needs and resources for this community. I will also say, I agree, we need to not make it a priority that they live in town, only because it will open up the applicant pool. And in this area of Connecticut, it is a commuting area. So if they do have family members that need to commute for their job, we need to consider that. Uprooting family and children from schools is also something to consider. And definitely we need someone with some government municipal experience. I've lived in town for about 22, 23 years. As far as being connected to the community, I think that's a two-way street. And if you want to be connected to the community, you need to just get involved and pay attention. It's difficult, so we need someone in that leadership position that can open up that two-way line of communication. I think that's all that I wanted to address from the questions you have up, but thank you for the engagement of the community this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Doug, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I think I'm pretty clear on the issues, and appreciate the feedback on it. Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Kate Howard-Bender, followed by John Crickmore, and then Rini Visa for a second time. If the hand's still for that.
Hi, everybody. Kate Howard-Bender, 103 Goose. Thanks for having this meeting, everybody. A couple things that I'm concerned about for our next town manager. I'm not super concerned about the residency requirement, but they should be kind of close, I guess. But as far as who should be helping our town council to run our town, I think that someone with a background in public administration, qualified for the position with experience in the position is very necessary. We need someone who is laser focused on ensuring all the previous policies are followed, and also supportive to the elected officials in making sure that everyone stays within their role. We need someone who is concerned about both long-term and short-term planning, diversifying our, like helping the town council to diversify our tax base so that we don't have this fear mongering that has been happening. And of course, like being aware of environmental impacts, financial impacts, et cetera. I mean, we're in a spot right now. I will say that I don't believe that excuse making ever works. And, trying to say things are based on a hope on a prayer is just not good for our community. We need someone who is going to be a town champion. We need someone who's going to promote inclusivity, who's going to help us to build our community back up, somebody who's going to be a team player, someone who is going to help the town council to work together with the Board of Ed land use and all the residents to really capitalize on the great place that Tolland is, and really hear all voices. That's what's on my mind. Thanks again for having this meeting. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kate. And then Doug, if you have any additional response, otherwise move on to John Crickmore, followed by Heather McGann.
Just to the point that I recognize, I think I mentioned to a couple of the elected officials I met with this week that it's for a smaller community dealing with the crumbling foundations, and now I understand you're dealing with some well water issues and contamination and concerns about that. I joked, I said, I guess the locusts are coming next. It's amazing that the issues that your community has had to face with. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. You've got to be a champion for your community and an advocate for the community to be effective in the role. So appreciate the comments, Kate.
Thanks a lot.
All right, John Crickmore.
John Crickmore, 31 Cook Road. Couple things. The educational part, the question is, to me, is not a huge concern. I think we all can agree, no matter what side of politics you follow, that we have a lot of overeducated people in Washington with very little common sense. So I'm not so concerned with having a fancy degree. I do think residing in Tolland, well, I don't know if it should be a requirement. It should be pushed. I think having a vested interest in the community that you're making decisions for is beneficial. I think that had our last town manager lived in Tolland, it wouldn't have been such an easy exit path for him. Not that we want someone here who doesn't want to be here, but someone that is, I guess, connected with the community. What I mean is, goes to community events, the parades, the other things that happen in Tolland. I understand with the residency thing comes having to move families and et cetera, but we're looking for someone that's going to manage our town. So I guess if it's not in there, if they're not interested in moving, then maybe we aren't interested in having them. Someone from the private sector, I think, would be fine if they, I don't think someone from the local grocery store, but if someone who's in a management position at a firm or something should not be overlooked because they have been in politics. Sometimes people that have been in politics for 40 years are set in their ways. And it would be nice to have a different perspective brought to Tolland, besides something the usual perspective of being involved in politics. We need someone that will, ultimately our town council decides what our budget is, but sometimes I feel in the past that town managers have essentially put budgets forward knowing that it was, the hard decision was left for the council. And I would like someone that works with the community as well as that works with the town departments. I feel in the past we've had town managers in Tolland and in other towns I've lived in that seem to not, I guess, have an even playing field when it came to what each department requested. There always seemed to be some that would get put to the back burner and others would get essentially what they wanted. And I think, again, if the community is centered around these decisions, and the town manager is looking to be the leader of the community and not just the boss of the town employees, we would be better off. Longevity is a great thing. Again, I think if someone lived here, the chances they would stay longer. I don't know if it's something that can be done on a pay basis as far as, whether they're longevity bonuses, if you stay for 5 years, if you stay for 7 years or 10 years, maybe some kind of incentive so that we're not doing this again in 2 years or in a year. I think someone maybe younger to the game would be helpful to Tolland. I don't think we need someone who's on their last 3 years before they're going to retire, and it's looking for one last stepping stone, I guess, before they take off and move out of state. I think that's about it. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Oh, excuse me. One more thing. I also would recommend that if it came down to it, that Miss Hancock be offered a position, being that she's been in Tolland for a long time and knows Tolland, which obviously is going to be a huge learning curve for somebody coming from out of state, out of town. So if it came to that, she has my vote. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Heather McCann, followed by.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. This is Heather McCann, 62 Crossan. I'm going to keep this sweet and short. I just wanted to echo the importance of the soft skills, emotional intelligence, demonstrated leadership skills, etc. But I also do think that hard skills are important since the town manager is our municipality's chief executive officer. I think besides a tenure of at least 7 to 8 years in a similar municipal position, I have to disagree with the last speaker that education is not important. Educationally, I think a master's degree from an accredited university is essential. A graduate degree takes time, hard work, and demonstrates dedication to complete complex projects while balancing additional responsibilities, which is fundamental in the town manager. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Rini Diesel.
Hi, thank you again for listening to me. I just wanted to also throw in some support for Ms. Hancock. I think she's got some great skill sets and she's been very dedicated to Tolland, knows the town, and I do think that there is some value in many of her skill sets. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rini. Karen Moran.
Yeah, Karen Moran, 50 Burlow Way. I just wanted to add to my previous comments that the requirement to live in town gets a little difficult when we do not have any alternate housing here in town other than single family homes. So that's a challenge for anyone moving to town that might want to be in some other housing. Also, I think that it's important to have a town manager that is going to be a strong and supportive partner for our superintendent. Our education budget, as in any municipal community, is a large part of the municipal budget. So I think that partnership is very important. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Your hands raised, so I'll just give another opportunity. Anyone who'd like to raise their hand, there's a raise hand icon button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Otherwise, *9 if you're on a mobile device. At this point, we're just kind of getting some input from the questions Doug has presented on the slide, if you're able to see it on the Zoom screen. So let's give it one more moment before Doug is going to move on to your next slide. Going once, going twice. All right, Doug, if you want to move to your next slide.
Okay, well, the next one's pretty easy. It's just, I appreciate being part of the process tonight. It's as I say, we normally do this face to face if we're in town, and appreciate the flexibility of doing it remotely. But this is important issue, as we mentioned before, and I think the fact that you've had a number of community participants plug in and spend an hour and a half or so of their time to be engaged in this effort is helpful. I will tell you, as your recruiter, it's extremely helpful for me, because obviously I'm engaging with a lot of folks from the community or from the city or the town itself, and staff and elected officials, but it's always helpful to get kind of a reassurance of where the community stakeholders are in the effort. So I can just tell you from my standpoint, this is extremely valuable, and I think it does help us in helping the council as they go through this process of a selection and ultimately, the evaluation and selection of your next manager. So thank you very much from my behalf, and I'll turn it back over to you, Steve, if there's any other questions that you or any of your colleagues on the council have, and we'll go from there.
I do see, I think, I'm just going to give an opportunity. I see Bob Rubino's hand is up. They want to add any additional commentary. I'll just add before we do that anyone who's still on would like to participate in the stakeholder survey, if you go to Tolland.org, it's actually one of the first links in the news section. And we deal, like I think you said at the beginning, Doug, we got about 172 or more.
We're almost up to 200 now. So,
okay.
So every time we do an e-blast, we get a good bunch. So this will more by Monday.
Great, thank you. All right, so Bob, if you, I'm going to unmute you, or ask you to unmute if you want to provide a little bit more commentary before we close out the session.
Great, thanks, Steve. Bob Rubino, 296 Weigold. Real briefly, I'm just wondering what the timeline is. Doug mentioned 3 months. I think that's entirely optimistic. Finding a good town manager or a manager of any kind, that's good, is typically a 6-month endeavor. But what's the timeline for the community to see, for instance, the results of the web-based survey? The second might be, when do you think we'll see a draft of the job description and the, we'll call it a PR blitz of how do we attract good candidates? And the third is, when might we be reconvened as a community to review that? Thank you.
Steve, I'll answer the first part of the question in the process. As I mentioned earlier, we do this a lot. Executive recruitment is part of our main business lines, and typically a 90-day process, give or take holiday breaks and windows, is a normal recruitment cycle. Now that's from the time we say go and we launch the position, the time candidates are interviewing. If a candidate that ultimately is selected, he or she may have an agreement with their community. They've got 30 or 60 or 90 days before they can leave to unwind. If it's a local candidate and they can transition earlier, they may be able to start right away. So just recognize that window of 90 days from start to finish of when you start the search to when you finish the interviews is just getting you to the final candidate and getting a candidate brought on board. It doesn't mean that they'll be able to start the next 2 weeks. In fact, I guarantee you more often than not, anybody that's in a senior leadership position, if they're coming from the municipal sector, probably are going to need at least 30 days at a minimum. And if they're local, 30 to 45 days might be realistic if they're not having to pick up and relocate. But if they're relocating their house or something, it's another 30 to 40 days at least. Anywhere from 30 to 90 days for transition is typically required in the arena. So your point about 6 months, that can be true if, in fact, from the time you start the search to the time the next manager is physically starting his or her responsibilities there. So with regards to the timeline, we're trying to finish up these profile interview processes. I hope to get that done this week, if not the first part of next week. It normally takes me about a week or so to develop the draft I brought this sheet back up. This is an example of what we did the last line. The piece that we do is called a position profile brochure, and that's the marketing piece. And it'll talk about the community. It'll talk about the governance of the organization, how you're structured, when your elections take place, any goals and objectives or priorities of the council that have been established. It'll talk about the challenges and opportunities that are facing your community, and we'll have those bulleted as well. And then we'll outline the ideal candidate section, which is kind of, I want that, it gives the prospective candidates a lens in which to evaluate their skills and whether they think they're a good match for the community. And that gets to a lot of the things we've talked about tonight, as well as some of the other feedback I've gotten from other community members. We certainly have education experience, whether it's a master's, a bachelor's, whatever that looks and feels, compensation and benefits, and then an application or how they apply to get the process. I would anticipate that I will have a draft back. After I draft the text part of this work, it goes to a team of our graphics people that do the layout similar to what you're seeing there in front of you. That normally takes about a week or 10 days for them to get it back to me, and then I've got a draft back in the council's hands. So my sense is towards the latter part of December, we should have something for the town council to consider. Normally at that point, they're reviewing it and making whatever adjustments in either pictures or edits to text or, just to make sure we get that ready. Typically, by the time I've turned it back to them, we get this probably about 95, 98% right off the bat. There's some tweaks to be made, and they're just minor edits. And then when I send that to the town council, I will also send recommended ad placements and language for them to review about where we think it ought to be advertised, and this is what the language is. And once they give us the green light, normally within, typically within a week after they've gotten the first draft, we're ready to hit the presses and hit go. Now that window is going to be right around Christmas time, so that may have a bearing on when we can actually launch the job because of staffing and things at our end, as well as the timetables at your end. But my suspicion is around the end of the month, we should be launching. And then from there, then we're into that 90-day window. With regards to the review process, the way it normally works is we take a lot of this feedback at the front end, like we're doing this evening and from the other meetings. But ultimately, most of the time, our councils that we work with are the ones that review it, coupled with staff to make sure we get the budget numbers right and the staffing numbers and all the appropriate data that we've captured. But that's only an internal review process. And then once the council's given us the green light to launch, we hit go on all our efforts, but we also work back with the town and saying, all right, we're going to give you the links we want you to place on your website that would have the link to the brochure as well as the link to SGR's application portal, because as prospective candidates are looking around, they may be bouncing around on your website and it's just an additional candidate outreach. So you'll have a chance as a public to see what's ultimately approved. But I will tell you that in fact, I don't think I've ever had, unless I've been working with a citizen appointed committee, with the town council is the one that normally approves the brochure. It hasn't gone back out for a community review, so to speak. But to your point, the things I've heard tonight and the things I can just give you an insight, many of the things I've heard this evening are common themes. And if you think about the way I view this and developing the text portion of this, it's like a word font or a word cloud. The more often they hear the same sorts of things, the bigger the font, the more likely it's going to end up in a brochure. The brochure is not intended to be a war and peace and include everything. It's enough to entice a candidate about the community and the organization, the challenges. And then I'm encouraging them to contact me to learn more about some of the specifics. So it won't have everything that's necessarily been talked about tonight, but I would hope that you would see as a participant in tonight's meeting that the draft would be reflective of some of the things that you heard this evening and not catch you by surprise. But I'll defer to the council if there's any other procedures that they would be considering in terms of the review of the brochure. But hopefully that gives you an idea of the timetable as well.
I think that Mike, I don't know if you have any additional commentary on that in terms of the feedback or releasing any results or compiling the results of the survey once we close out.
Well, that'll be up to the council once it's up to you to look at it, and if you release it, you can, or whatever. We'll finish that and then we'll deal with that at that point.
Okay.
The decision can be made by you.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, I hope that does cover some of your questions, Bob. And of course, always, if any residents do have additional input or concerns, feel free to reach out to towncouncil@tolland.org. And again, definitely check out the survey. All the input is greatly appreciated.
And I apologize, I didn't reference the survey. Thanks for bringing that back to the topic as well. Last time we looked at those results as well to get a sense of what the collective thoughts of your participants in the survey, and those will certainly be part of that kind of word cloud that I mentioned earlier. The common themes that come out of that. To the extent they're consistent, they provide us a way to help draft the brochure. So that factor will certainly be part of the information as well.
Thank you, Doug. So, not seeing any other hands raised or any other discussion at this point, I would entertain a motion for adjournment at 8:08 p.m.
Brenda Felucci, so moved.
Councilor Felucci, seconded by Vice Chair Reed. All in favor, we'll do a roll call vote. Council, if you are still, you may have left issue. So I'll just go on to Councilor Felucci.
Aye.
Councilor Udacek.
Aye.
Councilor Nuccio.
Aye.
Councilor Regan. Aye. Councilor Khan. Councilor Luber, are you still there to unmute? We're just making the vote.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Have a great night.